Thanks, Paul, and thanks to Reed Corporate for putting on a great event. It's actually my first time at Resources Rising Stars, really enjoyed it, and I thank you all for still being here at the end of the day. So, ABX is creating a highly prospective ionic adsorption clay rare earth prospect in Tasmania, and if there's one thing I want you to take away from today's presentation is that for ionic clay rare earths, pH is king. pH is king. So I'm an engineer, chemical engineer. I worked for Rio Tinto and CSIRO for more than 20 years and then joined ABX Group 3 years ago. So that's the disclaimer. I was thinking of reading it out, but that's probably a little bit cruel at this time of the day, so I chose not to. Paul's introduction touched on it. ABX actually has 3 areas. The 2 main ones are rare earths, rare earth exploration and production, and then developing a process to recycle a waste from aluminium smelting and turn it into a chemical used in aluminium smelting. And we also have bauxite, which is where we started from originally. I'm just going to talk about the rare earth today because of time. Coincidentally, we've actually just had an independent research group, Corporate Connects, publish a report on us today, a research report, which valued all 3 parts of the business. Valued us at 33 cents compared to our share price of 10 cents, so that's looking good. And just touching on the boards, we've got a board with very diverse experience. So Paul Lennon was the Premier of Tasmania back in the mid-2000s. Ian Levy, way back, was Chief Geologist of WMC and started a few companies, including ABX, just over 10 years ago. Ken Boundy's been a director of numerous different companies in a wide variety of industries. And then me, I guess I'm the new guy. So, rare earths, I'm just touching on the market. I mean, we're all hearing, oh, rare earths is exciting and growing, but what actually is it? So, there's 15 or so rare earths used in numerous applications, but the reason it's catching the excitement now is because there are 4 rare earths, shown on the right of the screen, that are needed to make permanent magnets. And these permanent magnets are needed in electric motors and wind turbines. So because the renewable economy is coming, we're making a lot more electric vehicles, a lot more wind turbines. That's why the demand is going up. So it's basically almost certain that the demand is going to keep growing. And you can see those 2 bars show that although the permanent magnet market currently is like about 1/3 of the volume of the rare earth market, it's about 90% of the value. So when you mine rare earths, you mine all of them, but most of the value you get is from those 4 on the right, and in particular, the 2 top ones, neodymium and praseodymium, are called light rare earths. They're reasonably high value, but the 2 others, terbium and dysprosium, are very high value because they're hard to find. So where do rare earths come from? So on the left, an example, Mount Weld, Lynas, the best rare earth mine outside of China, probably one of the best in the world. And you can see the splits of the different rare earths within that deposit. So 2 of the ones in the magnets, the praseodymium and the neodymium, that's about 1/4 of the deposit, but they've virtually got no dysprosium or terbium. The hard rock deposits typically don't have those. On the right is what's a mix from our deposit in Tasmania, and this is similar to other ionic clay projects in China. You can see the mix is completely different, and the important bit is the dark green, which is the dysprosium and terbium. So now it's about 3%. Now it doesn't sound like much, but that's half the value of the rare earths there is in those 3. And we hear that China dominates the supply chain. China, overall dominates the supply chain in rare earths, but for most of them it's about 70% of the supply. In these 2 heavy rare earths, it's 98% of the supply. It's because most of them come from these ionic clays and they're only processed in China. So that's why in the last few years, lots of companies have started saying, well, can we find these clays outside of China? And so we have. So we've found the first rare earths in Tasmania, and the reason we found it in Tasmania was that we'd been exploring for bauxite there for over 10 years. We've got bauxite resources. We've mined bauxite there, just small quantities, but we know the area. And during COVID, Ian Levy, our chief geo, just had this, remembering all these contacts and theories, there could be some rare earths here. We had all our bauxite assays, but we'd never assayed for rare earths. So he developed an algorithm to review that data, identify potential hotspots for rare earths, went back and found some old, or got out some old cores, resampled them, got some positive results, and then we started drilling. But what the really important point, and I'll emphasise this in the coming slides, is about the metallurgy. It's one thing to find rare earths. The distinctive feature is about the metallurgy, and we have reported the highest extractions, basically the best metallurgy of any clay prospect in Australia. And it's in a pretty amenable area, so it's mostly 50 k's west of Launceston. The area we're mainly exploring in is commercial forestry, which is a very amenable to us, potentially exploring and then mining there. And just some numbers on the resource size. So just last week, we did our latest upgrade to 21 million tonnes. That's probably towards the bottom end of what might be big enough, but that's from only 18% of our initial prospective area. So and we've got other tenements under application, so there's a clear line of sight to growing that resource significantly. And it meets the other requirements of being fairly shallow, sufficiently thick to be potentially exploitable. But this is the crux of what I want to convey to you today. It's one thing to find a resource with tonnes and grade. We also all understand that. But the thing is, I've said it a couple of times, pH is king with these clays. So on the left, I have the situation for ABX's resource in Tasmania. And that scale shows that we've got about 200 ppm of the 4 permanent magnet rare earths. When we've done the metallurgy testing under the very simple, cheap conditions that they use in China, we got about, on average, 40% of the rare earths out. So that's the dark green on that left-hand graph. And that's not bad. That's sort of comparable, maybe slightly lower, but sort of comparable to what they get in China. The second and third columns are hypothetical deposits, but they are illustrative of what other deposits are being found around the country and around the world. So the middle one, so they're all the same grade as us, hypothetically, but it's showing how much do you get out under the cheap conditions and then as you add acid. So adding acid means you lower the pH. So the middle one says, well, at the neutral cheap conditions, we got a little bit of rare earths out. As we kept adding acid, we progressively got more and more out, but that cost is going up. And on the right, we have an example, which again, there's examples like this around the country, whereas under these conditions, no matter how much acid you get, you still don't get any of it out. So although the grade is the same, effectively, you don't have any extractable rare earths. So I'm saying, well, you're adding acid, the cost is going up. Okay, well, but by how much? And this graph tries to illustrate it. So on the left-hand side of the graph, we have, again, based on some published numbers to say, a good ionic clay deposit, it might cost you $5 a kilogram. So this is the bottom of the blue curve, $5 a kilogram for the reagents, like the chemicals in the process. The price you might get for the product is the red line. So you might get up around $50 per kilogram. And that might go up and down over time, but that's reasonably illustrative. So if your acid cost, your chemicals cost is $5 a kilogram, you've got all your other costs, your equipment, your mining, your labour, your energy. With a price of 50, that sounds okay. What I've said is that then for a lot of deposits, you have to add more acid to get enough of the rare earths out. So that's going on to the right on that graph. And the scale is pH, but think about it in terms of adding acid. And the point is the steepness of that blue curve. As you're adding acid, your acid cost is going through the roof. Because it's an exponential scale, it's like earthquakes. A magnitude 6 earthquake is 10 times as bad as a magnitude 5. pH 3 is 10 times as acidic as pH 4. pH 2 is 10 times as acidic as pH 3. You're going from like apple juice down to battery acid on this scale. So what it's showing, if you're on the right-hand side, where you've had to go to pH 1, add a lot of acid, your chemicals cost is now, say, $60 a kilogram of product, that's more than the value of the product. So what the point is, this is a very steep cost curve. So you need to be, on the left-hand side, clearly probably to be profitable and clearly also to be more profitable than your competitors. And there's probably a point at which below a certain pH, you're not going to be viable. So the question is, well, what is that pH? And some knowledgeable people in the industry say it's actually pH 4. Now, I don't know if that's right, but there are people that are saying if you have to go to less than pH 4, if you have to add more acid and take it below pH 4, you're probably going to be really struggling. So if we go back to the previous graph, I said, well, that dark green is how much rare earth was extracted at each pH. So us on the left, we got a decent amount, one in the middle got a little bit, and the one on the right got none. And if you just take off the top sections of the graph, you're just left with that. So now, although the original graph showed 3 deposits all with the same grade, and we think, okay, well, they're all roughly the same, I just want to invest in the one with the most tonnes, this shows actually their effective grades, or their desorbable grades, are completely different. And that's what's going to dictate the economics of the project. So our strategy is to, as quickly as we can, develop production of a mixed rare earth carbonate. The idea with these clays is that you dig up the clay on site, you put it through this low-cost desorption and precipitation process, you produce a mixed rare earth carbonate, which is all the rare earths still together, but basically in a solid powder form, and then you can sell that to an existing refinery that does the separation into the separate rare earths. That's the quickest way of getting a profitable operation up and running, and it's advantageous because your capital cost is much lower. So if you have to build a big hard rock project with a refinery, you're looking probably at $1 billion plus. Another company just released a feasibility study on an ionic clay project, which was US 120 million. This just gives you an idea of the scale of the difference in capex. Helps you get a project up much sooner and easier. We have a philosophy, we only operate where welcomed. So in Tasmania, we say we've been there for more than 10 years. We know the area. There's some areas that are very amenable to mining, exploration, very supportive. Other areas, less so. We don't go there. If people don't want us, that's fine. There's plenty of good areas for us to go. And this year, the focus is particularly on metallurgy, and then really we're probably just about ready to start a scoping study to say, well, we think we've got a really good clay prospect. What actually is it going to cost in CapEx and OpEx to get this project up? There's still more drilling to do, of course. We want our resource to be larger. And one of my big things is engagement with potential customers to say, right, okay, we think we can produce this. Are you interested in that product? The general answer is yes. It's a pretty small market, so it's important to really understand your customers very closely. So yeah, the fundamental thing you have to remember, pH is king, and we hope you can join us in helping to increase rare earth production in Australia. Thank you.